Welcome. Delighted to be here today. My name is Alisha Griffey, and I'm excited by all of the work that Ladies Who Launch and First Women's Bank are doing to help women and non-binary entrepreneurs access investment capital. Excited particularly to be spending some time here today with Adrienne and with Claudia to talk about loans and how you can use them for your businesses. So looking forward to getting into that and talking about both what works, when it's a great time to use loans, and also what some of the pitfalls are and what founders can hopefully take away from experiences of others to avoid in terms of their own experiences going forward. So as I said, my name is Alisha Griffey. I am CEO and founder of Daintree Capital. I spent a decade in the startup world myself as an operator, COO, CFO of 3 different companies. So I spent a lot of time dealing with how to grow businesses, both from an operational perspective and a financial perspective, and spent time talking to different sources of capital, whether it was banks or whether it was private equity or angels or venture capitalists, trying to figure out how best to fund a company. And based on that experience, I decided to launch my own firm and focus a bit differently on how to get capital to women and other underrepresented founders, specifically focusing on working capital loans. So I've been asked to moderate this session today, and excited to be joined here by 2 of our founders, who I will introduce. First of all, welcome to Adrienne Walker, who is founder and CEO of BlueHenry Spirits. Adrienne loves to entertain her girlfriends, and she loves a great party, which usually involves, of course, a great cocktail. Adrienne became intrigued with how the craft cocktail industry is evolving and began looking for a way to contribute that could be all natural, approachable, and easy. BlueHenry entered the market in 2018, crafting beautiful fruit garnishes, complex sugar and salt rimmers, and a variety of other cocktail products. Adrienne is a former senior manager at the FDA, now on the other side of those same regulations, making delicious all-natural garnishes for the cocktail enthusiast. Welcome, Adrienne.
Thank you. Nice to be here today.
And also we have Claudia McMullin, who is the founder and CEO of Hugo Coffee Roasters. It is a female-founded WBENC certified coffee roaster whose mission is to save animals by selling fantastic, fair trade, organic coffee nationwide. Founded by Claudia, a reformed attorney, I like how you phrase that, in 2015, Hugo Coffee is on a mission to end animal cruelty, neglect, and abandonment. As you can guess, Claudia is a mad animal lover, always has been. So Hugo Coffee marries animal philanthropy and commerce because consumers want to know that their purchase choice will make a difference. Claudia's vision for Hugo Coffee is to be the go-to coffee for animal lovers nationwide. And there are over 63 million households in America that both drink coffee and have a pet. Welcome, Claudia.
Nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
So ladies, I'm excited to get into this conversation. What I thought we could do is kind of start the context with just the word that a lot of people view as off limits or bad, which is debt, right? Everyone thinks about debt and has a reaction of some sort. But one of the things I'm always struck by is while people hear the word debt and they think bad, if you think about your personal life, you know, there are different kinds of debt. And when people take out a mortgage to buy a house, no one cringes, no one reacts negatively, it's all fine. But if you talk about credit cards, then people all of a sudden are like, oh my gosh, you know, that's of course not the credit card, the kind of debt I would want to have. So I'm curious whether that analogy applies to business in terms of this idea of good and bad debt. And I thought we could hopefully use that as a way to kick things off. Would love, maybe Claudia, let's start with you. Can you help us understand a bit more about how you have leveraged debt in a positive way to help your business?
Sure. So when I founded Hugo Coffee, I did so with my own personal funds, and I got a CDFI loan from a local organization called Mountain Lands Association of Governments. That's how I started. It was my intent all along was to own my company. So I didn't seek investor capital, and I still haven't sought investor capital. So I have funded growth of my company through revenue growth and debt.
It's
all
interesting
kinds
you
of debt.
mentioned that because I think a lot of people forget that the one of the benefits of debt is that you don't get diluted, right? You don't lose ownership stake in your company. So that's a really important benefit of debt for sure. Adrienne, tell us a little bit about how you've used debt in your business.
I think it's a very similar way. I think most people start entrepreneurship using their own funding, which, by the way, you should consider a debt to yourself because you do, in fact, want that money to come back to you that you've invested in the company. So it was through personal investment and through a little bit of credit card debt in the beginning. And then once I sort of realized the dream was no longer a dream, it was a real operating business. That's when I said, well, if I see this, shouldn't a lender see that? And so it was time for us to invest in larger facility, fancier equipment, more employees. And so we pursued a small business loan first through the SBA to help to fund that particular growth.
So I'd love to hear more about the different kinds of debt you've used successfully, right? We'll hold the bad stories till later, but let's talk a little bit about what kinds of debt you've used. You just mentioned Adrienne SBA. I know a lot of people are always curious about how well that works or doesn't work. So let's start there. Maybe tell us a little bit about your SBA experience, and then whatever other kinds of debt you've leveraged that you would do again, that you would recommend.
Mhm. So I actually started with an economic development fund in my county and started talking to them about, what it was that I wanted to do. And it turned out they were essentially a loan servicer for the SBA. And so all my documents went to them. And I went through the SBA loan process, which was lengthy. It took almost 9 months for that entire process to complete for me. It was a lot of paperwork. But it was good that I was using the Economic Development Fund within my community because kind of had some like an advocate to help me through the process. Although it was still long. It didn't speed things up, but it did help to explain things to me along the way, why it was taking so long, why certain documents were necessary, how to get them right the first time, that sort of thing. And I would say, while it did take a long time and longer than I expected, longer than the timelines we were putting for ourselves to move the facility and that sort of thing. The good thing about that loan was that it did force you to budget and to allocate certain funds to certain things for your growth, which was helpful. It was a significant amount of money, and without sort of doing that budgeting ahead of time, I think we would have perhaps run into a little bit of trouble later on. So that part was helpful, and you do need to stick to that budget because in order to get the funds in the end, you do have to produce receipts and invoices and all that sort of thing to match what it is you asked for.
What about from the perspective of like the interest rate and the amount of money they were willing to give you? Was that an area that was, a positive or a negative in terms of the SBA loan?
Yeah, for sure. The SBA does give a very competitive rate. Now, what I wasn't aware of was how much the fees were going to be that sort of cut into what I thought I was going to be getting when the process ended. And so when the process ended, we were maybe about $10,000 less than what I had expected, which is significant to anybody. So yeah.
Good to know. Claudia, what about you? What kinds of loans have worked best for you, or what's the range of loans you've looked at?
Oh my, I've looked at all the loans. Before COVID, The loans I had were CDFI loans. Those were the Mountain Land Association of Governments and something called the Utah Micro Loan Fund. Those two organizations locally kept me in business, allowed me to grow that in my own funds. And of course, I did have a few friends and family promissory notes that I've since paid off. Now, fast forward to the pandemic, and Hugo Coffee Roasters lost all of its revenue overnight, and loans and grants, but loans are how I survived and how I pivoted my business. I would not be here today were it not for debt, were it not for the lenders that reached out and helped me survive COVID and pivot to direct to consumer versus B2B sales.
Now, Claudia, was that just government loans? Like I know PPP, EIDL, some of those loans that were designed specifically for COVID relief, or did you have other private sector lenders who stepped in and helped you during that period as well?
It was not just PPP and EIDL, even though I took mad advantage of both of those.
Well, you should.
I got financing from the state. There was a bridge financing opportunity from our state governor's Office of Economic Development. I took advantage of that, and that was fantastically forgiven and converted into a grant, which was amazing. I got that UMLF, that Utah Micro Loan Fund. They called me right when COVID hit, and they said, "Claudia, do you need money?" And I said, "Yes, I do. And what can I do to get money?" And they said nothing, and just send me an email saying you need money. And they gave me money at a very low interest rate, at very favorable terms, to keep me alive, to help keep me alive, which was fantastic. I also have a line of credit from a commercial bank, Key Bank, which I'm like so thrilled that a bank would give me a line of credit. So I take advantage of that. And I'm trying to think what other loan opportunities I took advantage of during COVID. Honestly, I became the queen of finding money as a result of COVID, whether it be a grant or a loan. I found anybody and everybody who would give me money or lend me money or give me money.
You know, one of the things you mentioned that I have heard from a lot of other founders that I work with is the importance of having relationships. And particularly when it comes to lending, what I often hear people say is, man, having that relationship in place before you were in a bad spot was really helpful, because then when things went sideways, which they always do, you know, COVID's a dramatic example of that, where it went sideways for everyone all at once. But, you know, businesses struggle at different times for different reasons. And if you already have a lending relationship in place, it's easier to go back to them and say, hey, you know, can we do something else here? And so I'm curious if you all agree with that, and if you feel like, you know, even if you don't need a loan right now, doing something small, you know, building the relationship with the line of credit, a bank, or taking out a small loan with a different creditor might then help you in the future. Has that been your experience?
100%. 100%. I have, even though Zions Bank has never given me a loan, I develop a relationship with the people at my Zions branch, and to be prepared for when I am credit worthy for a commercial bank line of credit, you know, for $200,000, $300,000, like when I get there. So I completely am, you know, laying the pavement for that. I have a relationship with the people at Key Bank. They call me and see how I'm doing, which is fantastic, wonderful. And Alisha, you are the perfect example of somebody who I took a loan from to get into a relationship. I didn't need that loan that much at the time that I got it from. I took a loan with Daintree, and I did it specifically to have a relationship with you and Daintree Capital, because I know that I'm going to need working capital. I'm going to need more working capital. I'm going to need bigger loan than what we took together. I'm going to need a bigger one down the road. And you already know my track record because I paid you back. Right? You know my books, you know my track record. I keep you posted on what's going on in my business, so that the next time I come to you, you'll be like, yeah, I'm going to give Claudia money because she's such a great risk.
Well, that's good to hear. I certainly appreciate that, and it is true from my side as a lender. If you have a relationship with someone, it colors everything, right? Then you have the background and the context, and you understand a little bit more. It makes you willing to take on more risk, potentially, because you kind of have a bit of a sense of that background. Um, Sorry,
Related to that,
Adrienne. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I'd like to speak of another loan product that we've used. We sell a lot of our products on Amazon. We do fairly well on Amazon, and we've taken advantage of Amazon Lending. Now, can people say they really have a personal relationship with Amazon? Not exactly. However, Amazon has a huge personal relationship with your data. They know everything about you as a vendor, how much you're selling, how much you can keep inventory with them, that sort of thing. And they use all of that information to design loan packages for the people who sell on their platform. And so it has been a wonderful tool we've used actually more than once. Right there in Seller Central, they will tell you how much you're able to take out in a loan. They've got different loan terms available for you, and I applied for a loan and received the funding within 24 hours. So that was amazing. Now also, because they know everything about me and my and the banking, they do take that payment straight out of your payment that you would have received for proceeds on Amazon. But I mean, that's fine. You understand those terms going into it, and it does help to build an excellent credit relationship with Amazon. And so now every time I go into Seller Center, I see an even higher dollar amount I could take in loans from them. Not exactly a personal relationship, but
Now,
we do
Adrienne,
share a lot of information.
So Adrienne, I think it's interesting you mentioned Amazon Lending, because I've heard a lot of founders talk about how helpful it's been to work with some of the people who already know your data, whether it's Amazon or also people have talked about Shopify Capital or PayPal Capital, same idea. And what I've heard, and I'm curious if this is similar with your relation or your experience, is the rates there actually can be quite good because they have so much access to your data. They know exactly how much money you're making. So there's no worrying that you're cooking the books or that there is, they've got all the data. And they also have the control, at least on Shopify. I don't know if it's true with also Amazon. They will suck the money right out first, right? So the risk to them is incredibly low, so that for you as a founder, the good news is your rates tend to be quite low. The bad news is, as I've heard it, that you don't control, you're not making a payment, they suck the money out, and they often don't give you as much money as you need. Is that consistent with your experience, Adrienne?
Yes, they do take the money directly from what they would have paid out to you in your payment installments. Yes. So, however, I mean, you know the terms, and so that has worked for us. That hasn't been an issue. I understood that going in, and it for us it was the amount of money that we needed for that particular investment that we were making. So yeah, we didn't have an issue with the amount of funding.
Okay, good to hear. So let's flip a little bit. Let's talk about the ugly side, right? That not all debt is the same, not all debt is good, and there are situations, obviously, where it can get you into trouble. So Claudia, let's start with you. Tell us about some situations that haven't worked and what you've learned from those situations.
Sure. The situation that didn't work was I got myself too excited about growing in grocery, getting into UNFI, opening distribution centers, getting grocery chains, having no earthly concept of how much money that was going to take. One, of sunken costs to get on a shelf, to get the DCs opened. Then on top of, then suddenly, so one, you're out of cash if you do that because you have to spend all this money. And then two, you get big POs, and then you need working capital very quickly, to fulfill those POs, because you don't want to say no, even though now I understand you can say no. And now I realize you can negotiate and you can go, actually, I can't really do that. I can do this. Is that okay? But I didn't know that then because I was a grocery newbie and I was just so excited to get into UNFI and these DCs and get these POs. And then I found myself so cash strapped. I did not have the working capital. I did not have 100 grand in the bank sitting there for working capital purposes, which is about what I need. And so I got sucked into a fintech loan. And the fintech loan, so the way it works is they call you and they say, you just send me your bank statements for the past 6 to 12 months. And then they know the cash in and cash out. Unfortunately, for the group that I did work with, they took into account in their analysis of how much they could give me grant money, money that was not revenue from sales. So they lent me money, and then this is what they say. We can give you $100,000 in 24 hours, and all you have to do is pay back $2,250 a week over 18 months. And then you go, oh my God, that's fantastic, I'll do it, because you're going to get 100 grand in the bank in 24 hours. But then if you actually do the numbers, then you go, what's the interest rate on that? And they say, oh, that's not how we do things. This is how we do things. You're going to pay us back this amount of money. So then you do the numbers after the fact and you go, oh my God, I just agreed to this usurious payday lender rate that will only service this debt if my growth strategy works. If I grow at this accelerated rate that I have been led to believe I will in grocery by other people, and it's in my budget, and I'm going to grow like a mad person. And you don't grow like a mad person, and you have this debt, and that debt can take you out and can put you out of business. And I was this close to going out of business because of that one debt. And I ended up liquidating my IRA to pay it off, cutting costs, doing everything I could to turn everything around. And I did that in June, and I am now, I am cash flow positive and operationally breaking even or better.
Claudia, you mentioned that the lender said, we don't have an interest rate, we don't do it that way. I think that's a really important point because there are lots of different ways to structure loans. And the most straightforward way is, here's the interest rate, here's the period of time, here's your monthly payments. But there are these other loans that are structured differently that tend to be more like revenue based, or they're, a flat rate, but it's like you keep paying over a set number of payments. And I think one of the things that's helpful, perhaps for people to think about is, even if the lender won't quote you an interest rate, the first thing you should do is do your own math, because there is an implied interest rate, right? And it may not be how they come up with the numbers, but there is an implied interest rate. And so you can kind of reverse back in and say, okay, this is the payments over 18 months. Do the quick Excel math and figure out what the implied rate is.
Yep.
So that you either know which loans to avoid, or you at least know what you're getting into, even if you decide, you know what, I'm willing to take this bargain because I need the cash tomorrow, but at least you know what you're getting yourselves into. Adrienne, tell us a little bit about what hasn't worked on the debt front for you.
So fortunately, we've had pretty good experiences. I will say, though, that the amount of time that the SBA loan took was not expected for us, and really could have, as I mentioned before, we were using that loan to pay for a move, which wound up taking longer than we expected. And so it just so happened things aligned. But had we have been able to meet our original plan, we would have been in trouble because the funding would not have arrived on time. And the timeline wasn't visible to us. No one really communicated how long that process was going to take. You kept hearing, oh, just another couple weeks, just another couple weeks, but you kept hearing another couple weeks, another couple weeks. So that really was the biggest issue for us. The other thing that just made me uncomfortable about the SBA loan is we went into it about 3.5, 4 years into the business. And at that point, I thought that this would be based on the business, the credit of the business at that point. However, the SBA loan that we use made made me use my home, my rental property, all of the things as collateral for that loan. And that made me feel very uncomfortable. I own my business. My husband doesn't own it with me, but he owns all of these other things that I had to put up for collateral. It just, it just to me didn't feel right. Particularly with the business being as successful as it was and already into year 4, 3, 4. Why did I have to put so many personal things up for collateral? Hopefully that will not be an issue. We'll be fine and pay this loan off and I won't lose my house. But,
Well, that's a good segue, which is what questions should you ask, right? So we've got people joining today who maybe haven't done a business loan yet ever, or they've done one, but they aren't quite sure if they did it right. What questions do you go in asking before you enter into a debt relationship with someone else?
Yeah. Fees. How long is it going to take? What do I have to put up as collateral? And what are you going to base my rate and the amount of money I'm going to get? What are you basing that on? Is it purely the financials of the business? Is it cash flow? What is it specifically? Because particularly if you're not rushing into this, you do have time to try and fix those things to get a better rate if that's your lender of choice.
Claudia, what would you add to that?
I would say, would you give me money? Yeah, you will? Okay, I'll take it.
Wait a second, that goes against your previous advice, which was...
I mean, honestly, historically, I'm like, hi, I need money. Oh, you'll give me money? Oh, that's a good rate. 8%, 60 months. What's the monthly payment? Oh, I can do that. Oh, you need a personal guarantee? Sure. Oh, you need a lien on my house? If you need it, okay, fine. When you don't have a lot of options because you haven't planned for your cash flow needs, you're under the gun when you need money. And when you're under the gun when you need money, you're not the one asking the questions. They're the ones asking the questions and demanding the documentation and the information, and they say yes or no, and you get to say yes or no. I have never been in a bargaining position for debt.
But it sounds like you are now that you've gotten yourself out of some of those higher rate loans. And so now going in, obviously it's more eyes wide open in terms of some of those things. And I think that's, that's what's key as I think about it, as someone who got into the investor space because I wanted to see more women and people of color building and growing their businesses. And the data suggests that while women and people of color found businesses, they don't get it over the $1 million revenue hurdle as frequently. And part of why is that the money dries up because there isn't access to as much investment capital. And so I think making sure that there are lots of options out there and that founders are well educated on what they can ask and what they should be asking. I mean, one thing I might add to the list you guys just came up with is default provisions, right?
Yes.
You always want to assume your business is going to do well. You want to bet on success. You want to be optimistic, but you have to understand, so what happens if I don't make that payment, right? Because there are some lenders where it's like, well, you've got, this grace period and then here's what happens. And then, and maybe the next steps give you time to right the ship. But there are other ones where it's like immediately, all of a sudden, wait a second, we're going to put a lien on your house, So understanding what those default provisions are, I think would be important.
And prepayment. Like I was led to believe, and maybe it was like magical hearing, I don't know. But I thought that if I paid that loan off faster, I wouldn't owe the total amount of money, the 18 months. You can pay off anytime. And I was led to believe that the balance of the interest was then waived because when you refinance it with that same organization, they'll waive, obviously all the remaining, give you better terms. I mean, that's the whole hook. You were going to nail you the first round. You're going to pay extraordinary interest. They don't say it that way, but that's the fact. And then you refi and you get it's a little less. and then they forgive the balance of the first loan, the first loan and the interest. And you're led to believe that if you don't refi and you just pay it off, you'll get the same accommodation. Not true. Oh, so not true. So I had to come up with the entirety of what I would owe over 18 months when I paid it off.
Right. To be clear, though, that is specific to the situation you were in and into how that loan was structured. There
Yes.
are other loans out there where if you pay early, you are avoiding interest. So
No,
knowing the difference between those two and knowing which one you've signed up for is helpful and important.
Right. I mean, the whole thing, if you have the time to plan, and then you are in a position to ask questions. You are in a position to say, no, thank you. That's too high. That's too short term, whatever that number is. I don't want to give you a personal guarantee. I don't know why I'd have to. I'm doing $1 million plus, and whatever it is. But if you react, if you're taking on debt in a reactionary way, you have given away all your power. If you had any to begin with, by the way, but it's gone.
It's a great point, because either the loan process is going to take too long or something. You do really want to look for funding before you absolutely need it, so that you can ask all the right questions, compare different lenders, and give yourself enough time, enough leadway for whatever your company investment or your operating expense needs are. Yeah.
And I really don't think you can emphasize enough the importance of, in addition to the planning and not being reactionary, is developing relationships. Like, I didn't even know like I needed a banker relationship when I started this business. And I'd been banking, obviously. I'm no spring chicken. I've been banking for 1,000,000 years. I never occurred to me I need to know my banker or the branch manager or somebody important at the bank, until I went through the Goldman Sachs 10,000 small business program in 2019. And it was something I took away from that program is I need to get to know my bankers. And I took that to the bank, and I got to know people so that I could have people to turn to. And, 6 months ago when I needed cash and I was taking a hike with Hugo, I'm like, where am I going to go for cash? I need cash. What am I going to do? I don't want to liquidate my IRA. I don't want to do this, that, or the other thing. And then I realized, oh my God, I have 2 loans with Mountain Lands Association of Governments and Utah Micro Loan Fund. I paid them way down. I mean, I only owe 30% or 20% of what I got originally. So I just called them and I'm like, hey, can I get the difference back? Can you re-lend me the difference? You gave me 125 in 2018. It's down to 30. Can I get that 95? Or that's whatever. And they gave it to me.
That's a clever way to think about it, right? You built a $100,000 relationship, you paid it down. Can you bring it back up to that? That's a great way to think. The other thing you mentioned, Claudia, and I have heard other founders who've had success with this as well, which is look into what's available at the state and local level. That there are programs sometimes in cities, but often at the state level, that are designed specifically to support small businesses. Yep. The best money out there is always grant money, right? If you can get a grant money, like that's amazing. And sometimes they have grants available, but they often sometimes have low interest rate loans as well. And so spending some time wherever it is you're located, digging into whatever it is, the business development, economic council, there's all sorts of different departments and every state names it something differently, unfortunately. But it's probably worth some Google search time to figure out, are there some institutions within your state or within your city that might actually be able to be a source of capital for you? And it sounds like in your case, Claudia, those relationships, even turned into a loan that turned into a grant, which is fantastic.
No, I have a fantastic state when it comes. Utah is very pro-business. It's very proactive in helping small businesses. And we have a fantastic office of economic development, and they always have opportunities. I mean, it could be in aerospace, it could be in X, Y, or Z, industry, depending on what the focus is of the governor and the legislature. But there are opportunities in Utah, they abound if you just do some research. And if you get certified female founded, with WeBank certification. That's also a fantastic resource for opportunities for female founders to get capital, lender, loans. It's amazing how much is out there. And that's another thing Goldman Sachs taught me. Like, I'm up here in Park City in La La Land, and I have no idea what's going on down in Salt Lake City and in the state capital. And then I go down to Salt Lake and I take this course, and I'm like, oh my God, there's all these free resources down here to help small businesses start and stay alive and grow.
Yep. Well, ladies, we're running up on the end of our time. I don't know if there's any other just kind of last words of wisdom or lessons learned you have that you wanted to share for those who might be thinking about taking out a business loan in the near future. Adrienne, any final thoughts?
Well, I didn't mention that, of course, you need to keep your accounting up to date, because they're going to ask for your numbers, and they're going to potentially ask for you to manipulate your numbers, slice and dice them one way or another. And if you're not working with good data to begin with, that's going to be a very difficult process for you. So that's
good point.
My last point.
As a lender, I appreciate you making that point because it does matter.
Yeah.
Claudia,
it's
any
like
final words?
It's like the whole concept of know your numbers. Like I always focused, because I'm insane, on revenue. Like, oh, I'm so excited. Look, I grew. Like, oh my gosh, I did 30% better this month. Or year over year, I'm up blah, blah, blah percent. Don't pay as much attention to the expenses. So know your numbers, know your ratios, have projections that are realistic, not up in the night, and do a cash flow projection and anticipate your cash needs. And go for them and go try to satisfy those future needs when you don't need the money. Exactly what Adrienne said. When you don't need the money is when you want to get. And the final thing, I wouldn't be afraid of debt. There's nothing to be afraid of if you get the right debt.
I think that is a perfect place for us to end. So just as I was taking some notes as you guys were talking, because I think there's a lot of wisdom here. Some of what I heard, just to start where you ended, Claudia, is debt is not bad, but you need to be really smart in how you think about it. And some of the things you guys shared today that would help someone approach this in a smart way are about building relationships. So reach out to bankers, reach out to your local business development, economic bureau in your state, build relationships there before you actually are in a situation where you're at dire need for cash. So build relationships, build them early. Adrienne, your point about having your books in order is really important. Lenders are not going to be comfortable lending to you if your books are a mess. And then I think lastly, I heard, thinking about different types of debt for different situations and just being smart about that, whether it's the Amazon lending might be great for that one channel, but maybe, there are other sources of capital for other channels or different ways to structure loans for different situations, short-term, long-term, et cetera. So ladies, thank you for taking your time. I'm confident that the folks listening in are going to derive a lot of value from hearing from your experience. Also want to thank ladies, all of the ladies involved in this production of this session today. And also there's several other sessions coming up. I think we've got one with PayPal and Cabbage that are different lenders that can help people think about different debt options. But big thank you to Ladies Who Launch and to First Women's Bank for organizing all of this and bringing together some folks who have experiences and can hopefully share with those who are interested. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.